The morning I found out my land was gone felt unreal, like something out of a bad movie. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, when the thought crossed my mind to double-check some paperwork with the county clerk's office. I had been hearing rumors in town that the HOA had been throwing their weight around, making bold moves, but I never imagined it had anything to do with me. My 1,500 acres had been in my family for generations. It was more than just dirt and trees, it was history, blood, sweat, and legacy. I walked into the county clerk's office with that same easy confidence I always carried when dealing with paperwork. But within 5 minutes, that confidence was gone. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with glasses sliding down her nose, pulled up my file on her computer. She frowned, scrolled, then frowned again. "Sir," she said carefully, "according to these records, your property was transferred last month. Looks like the Homeowners Association is listed as the new owner." At first, I laughed, thinking it had to be some kind of mistake. "That's impossible," I told her, shaking my head. "I never signed anything. I never sold it." But she just turned the monitor toward me. And there it was, in black and white, my 1,500 acres of land, stamped and recorded as belonging to the HOA. The words blurred for a second as my stomach dropped. My hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white, trying to steady myself. "You're telling me they sold my land? Without my signature?" The clerk gave me a helpless shrug. "All I can tell you is what's on the record. If you believe it's fraud, you'll need to take it up legally." I walked out of that office in a daze, sunlight hitting me like a slap in the face. The courthouse steps felt steeper than usual. I couldn't even remember walking back to my truck, but when I sat in the driver's seat, the reality hit me hard. Someone. No, not just someone, but the HOA, the same group that had been acting like kings of the community, had gone behind my back and taken what wasn't theirs. My family's land. My livelihood. The anger came in waves. First was disbelief. Then came a slow burn that turned into a fire in my chest. I thought about all the times the HOA board had thrown their weight around, dictating lawn colors, mailbox styles, and even the kind of shutters people could put on their houses. They had always acted above the law. But this? This was more than arrogance. This was theft, plain and simple. Sitting there in my truck, I clenched the steering wheel so hard my palms ached. One thing was certain, they had picked the wrong man to steal from. They thought they could play games with paperwork and get away with it. But I knew my land, my rights, and the law better than they ever imagined. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one, and I was ready to take it all the way. I didn't sleep much after that day at the county clerk's office. The idea that the HOA had managed to steal my land legally, or at least make it look legal, kept me awake, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their smug faces, the kind of people who thought rules applied to everyone but them. I knew I couldn't just storm into a meeting and shout about it. That would get me nowhere. If they had stolen my land with paperwork, then paperwork was how I was going to get it back. So I started digging. At first, it was just long evenings in my study, coffee turning cold while I pored over property deeds, charter documents, and HOA bylaws. The legal language was thick, twisted like a maze designed to confuse anyone who dared enter. But I've never been one to back down from a fight, especially not when family land was on the line. I read and reread every sentence until the words started to make sense. The deeper I went, the more I noticed patterns. Tiny cracks in their foundation. One night, around 2 a.m, I stumbled onto something that made my heart race. Buried deep in the HOA's original charter from decades ago was a clause about property rights. It was dusty, overlooked, and written in outdated legal terms, but the meaning was clear: the land the HOA controlled, including their prized lakefront estates, was still technically tied to the original deed holder of the surrounding acreage. And that deed holder? Me. I sat back in my chair, stunned. It was like finding a hidden weapon in plain sight. All this time, they had been building their million-dollar mansions on land that, legally speaking, was still under my umbrella. The HOA might have maneuvered to sell off my acres, but in doing so, they had opened a door they didn't realize existed. A door I could walk right through. The next morning, I went down to the records office again, this time armed with notes, copies, and questions. The clerk looked at me differently when I pointed out the clause. She admitted, quietly, that it had been overlooked for years. "Most people don't read this far back," she said, almost impressed. I walked out of that building with my pulse pounding, not from anger this time, but from excitement. I wasn't powerless. I had leverage. And unlike the HOA, I wasn't about to forge signatures or play dirty. I had the law on my side. That night, as the sun set over the lake, I stood there staring at the row of multi-million-dollar mansions the HOA board members called home. Their lights flickered on, casting warm glows across the water. They probably thought they were untouchable, safe behind their gates and fancy legal tricks. But I knew better now. They had taken my land, but in doing so, they had put their entire empire in my hands. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. They wanted to play with fire? Fine. I was ready to burn their house down legally. The morning of the auction, the courthouse parking lot was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. Pickup trucks, shiny SUVs, even a few sleek sports cars lined up like soldiers, each one carrying someone hungry for a piece of lakefront property. I stepped out of my truck with my head high, a folder of legal papers tucked under my arm, and a calm fire burning in my chest. This was the day everything turned around. The HOA board members were already there, standing in a little cluster off to the side. They looked rattled, whispering among themselves, shooting me daggers with their eyes. Not long ago, these were the people who smirked at me in town meetings, brushing off my concerns like I didn't matter. Now, they looked like cornered animals, trapped in their own mess. I didn't say a word to them, I didn't need to. The paperwork spoke for itself. Inside, the auction room buzzed with energy. Realtors flipped through binders, investors chatted about square footage, and locals whispered about how these million-dollar homes had suddenly hit the market. The auctioneer, a tall man with a voice like rolling thunder, stood at the front, tapping his gavel against the podium. When he called the room to order, the chatter died down instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "today we have several prime lakefront properties up for bid. All legal, all final, all certified by the county. Let's get started." The first house on the block was a sprawling mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. I remembered seeing it built just a few years ago, HOA board members bragging about its design at every neighborhood gathering. Now, it was about to belong to someone else. The bids started flying fast, $500,000, $600,000, $800,000, then over $1 million. Every number was like music to my ears. The board members sat stiff in the back row, their faces pale, watching their empire get chopped into pieces and handed off to the highest bidder. "Sold," the auctioneer roared, slamming his gavel. The crowd erupted in applause. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, feeling the weight of justice in every cheer. One by one, the mansions went up for sale. Each time the gavel hit the block, another chunk of the HOA's pride was gone. What they had built on stolen ground was now being dismantled in front of their eyes, legally, publicly, and without a shred of foul play from me. I didn't forge papers. I didn't scheme behind closed doors. I just used the very law they had tried to twist against me. By the end of the day, their $10 million dream neighborhood was scattered among new owners. Some were locals who had always dreamed of living by the lake, others were investors looking for vacation rentals, but all of them were free from the HOA's grip. As I walked out of the courthouse, the board members avoided my eyes. They shuffled toward their cars like defeated soldiers retreating from battle. For the first time in years, I felt the heavy knot in my chest finally loosen. They had stolen from me. But I had taken everything from them, fair and square. The day after the auction, the lake was quiet in a way I hadn't heard in years. No HOA trucks patrolling the neighborhood, no board members strutting around like they owned the place. Just the soft ripple of water against the shore and the distant call of a loon echoing across the morning air. I stood at the edge of the property, hands in my pockets, watching the sunlight stretch over the water. It felt like the land was breathing again, free. Word spread fast through town. People couldn't stop talking about how the mighty HOA had fallen. Neighbors who'd spent years living under their iron grip finally smiled without fear. Some came up to me in the diner that morning, clapping me on the shoulder. "You did what we all dreamed of," one man said. Another woman leaned in, lowering her voice. "They thought they were untouchable. Guess you proved them wrong." I just nodded, keeping my words few. It wasn't about bragging, it was about balance being restored. Meanwhile, the former board members scattered like leaves in the wind. Their mansions, once symbols of wealth and power, were now someone else's dream homes. I heard one of them had to move into a cramped apartment in the city. Another was fighting lawsuits from angry buyers who claimed the HOA had lied to them. Justice, I thought, has a way of catching up to people like that, but for me, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure. Walking my land again, all 1,500 acres of it, I felt connected to my roots in a way I hadn't in years. Every tree, every fence line, every dirt path meant something. My grandfather had walked this ground, my father had worked it, and now I was standing here, knowing I had defended it with everything I had. One evening, I took a boat out onto the lake. The houses along the shore still glowed with light, but they no longer felt like fortresses of arrogance. They were homes again, places for families, laughter, and peace. I leaned back against the seat of the boat, the cool air brushing my face, and let myself finally relax. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wasn't thinking about loopholes or paperwork. I was just a man on his lake, surrounded by the land he fought to protect. I realized then that the HOA had made one fatal mistake: they underestimated me. They thought I was just another landowner, easy to push aside with fancy lawyers and fake signatures. What they didn't know was that this land wasn't just property to me, it was legacy. And you don't steal legacy from someone without paying the price. So, yes, they stole my 1,500 acres. But in the end, I sold off their $10 million kingdom legally, cleanly, and without ever breaking a single rule. As the boat drifted across the water, I couldn't help but smile. They wanted power, but I had something stronger: the law and the will to use it. To bring the whole empire crashing.